Okay, so if you're gearing up for your CIH or CSP exam, or maybe you're the one running a hearing conservation program, you are in exactly the right place. We are about to break down the specific math that can absolutely make or break your program during an audit, and it all boils down to noise dosimetry.
I want you to let that sink in for a second. If you're just looking at a single decibel reading from a sound level meter, you're only getting a single snapshot in time. But here's the thing. Hearing damage isn't a snapshot. It's the whole movie of a worker's entire shift.
So today, we're diving deep. We're going way beyond that simple meter to uncover the real engine behind modern noise assessment, the dosimeter, and, more importantly, the critical math that powers it. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why a simple sound meter just doesn't cut it. Then, we're going to jump right into the big debate, the OSHA rules versus the NIOSH rules. From there, we'll decode the math behind DOS and TWA, lay out a clear compliance playbook, and wrap up with some really important tips for surviving those tough audits and exams. So let's get right into it. Why do we even need anything more than a simple decibel meter? Well, because that one little number can be incredibly misleading. I love this comparison because it really hits the nail on the head. A sound level meter? That's like taking a single photo of the noise right next to a specific machine. It's useful, for sure, for spot checks. But a dosimeter, now that's like a video camera that follows a worker around all day long. It captures their personal and their cumulative dose as they go from quiet areas to loud areas. That is the data that tells you their actual risk. And this is exactly why that cumulative exposure is the whole ballgame. See, hearing damage isn't just about intensity, how loud something is. It's a dance between intensity and duration. And that third pillar right there, the exchange rate, that's the secret sauce. It's the mathematical rule that connects the two, and it's where things get really, really interesting.
So that exchange rate we just mentioned? Well, it's at the very heart of a major debate in the safety world. Here in the US, you've got two main players setting the rules, OSHA and NIOSH. And you have to understand, they don't just have different numbers, they have completely different philosophies, and each is backed by its own set of math.
Now, this right here is probably one of the most critical distinctions you need to lock in. OSHA, they set the permissible exposure limit, the PEL. This is the law. It is the minimum standard that you legally have to meet. NIOSH, on the other hand, gives us the recommended exposure limit, or REL. This isn't law, it's a health-based best practice. It's what the science says is best for actually preventing hearing loss.
And here we are at the core of their disagreement, the exchange rate. OSHA uses a 5 decibel exchange rate. This is based on an older idea called the recovery hypothesis, which kind of assumed the ear could heal itself a bit during quieter parts of the day. So, for every 5 dB you go up, they cut your allowable exposure time in half. But then there's NIOSH. They use the 3 decibel rate, which is in line with the actual physics of sound. Their equal energy principle recognizes that a 3 dB increase literally doubles the acoustic energy hitting your eardrum, so you have to cut the time in half to keep the risk the same.
Okay, now look at what this means in the real world. At 90 dBA, OSHA says you're good for a full 8 hours. NIOSH says, whoa, hold on, your limit is more like 2.5 hours. But watch this. At 100 dBA, the difference is just staggering. OSHA allows a full 2 hours. NIOSH, following the science, says your safe limit is only 15 minutes. That is a massive gap in protection, and it has huge implications for a worker's health and, frankly, for your legal liability. And that brings us to this simple but incredibly powerful statement. Meeting the OSHA standard is about staying compliant with the law. Adopting the NIOSH recommendation is about genuine, proactive hearing loss prevention. So, how do we actually measure exposure against these rules? Well, it all comes down to the math that's humming away inside your dosimeter. And hey, I know it might look a little intimidating, but I promise once you see the logic behind it, it's actually pretty straightforward. The main number your dosimeter is going to give you is the noise dose, and really it's just a percentage. The best way to think about it is like a battery gauge for your hearing. When you hit 100% dose, you've used up your entire allowable noise budget for the day. Anything over 100%, and you're officially in overexposure territory. But a percentage isn't always what we need for our reports. We often have to translate that dose back into an 8-hour time-weighted average, or TWA, which is a dBA value. And this right here, this is the official OSHA formula to do just that. And that little constant, 16.61, isn't just a random number. It's derived directly from the logic of that 5 decibel exchange rate.
All right, let's make this real. Let's walk through an example. Let's say a worker's dosimeter comes back with a 200% dose. What's their TWA? Well, first you take 200 and divide by 100, which gives you 2. Then the log base 10 of 2 is about 0.301. You multiply that by our magic constant, 16.61, and you get almost exactly 5. Add that 5 to the 90 dBA baseline, and boom, a TWA of 95 dBA. See? It makes perfect sense. A 200% dose is double the exposure, and under that 5 dB rule, a 5 dBA increase is what doubles the exposure. The math lines up perfectly.
Okay, now that we have the math down, let's talk about the real-world compliance playbook. OSHA has 2 absolutely critical thresholds that every single safety pro has to know inside and out: the action level and the permissible exposure limit.
Now listen up, because this is a point that trips up a lot of people. These two are not the same thing. Hitting the action level of 85 dBA TWA is your early warning. That's the trigger. At that point, you must start a hearing conservation program. You're doing audiometric testing, training employees, and monitoring noise. But if you cross the line and exceed the PEL of 90 dBA TWA, the game changes. The requirements get way stricter. Now you have a legal duty to implement engineering controls if you can, and hearing protection is absolutely mandatory.
All right, let's bring this all home. Why did we just grind through all this technical detail? It's simple. Because one way or another, you are going to be tested on it, either on a tough certification exam or even worse, during a surprise OSHA inspection.
Just picture it for a second. An OSHA inspector is standing in your facility, and they start asking questions like, what exchange rate did your dosimeter use for this measurement? Can you show me why your TWA calculation resulted in this value? Where's the audiometric testing data for every single person who hit the action level? If you can't answer those questions confidently and correctly, you simply cannot defend your program.
And hey, for all of you out there studying for your CIH or CSP exam right now, you might want to hit pause and take a screenshot. This is basically your study guide for the noise section. You will, without a doubt, be tested on the difference between the 3 dB and 5 dB rates, on converting dose to TWA, on the different requirements for the action level versus the PEL, and for calculating those allowable exposure times. Mastering this is non-negotiable if you want to pass.
So if there's one big idea to take away from all this, let it be this one. A sound level meter, it just measures noise. A dosimeter, when you truly understand the math behind it, measures a worker's actual risk.
And that leads us to the real bottom line. Understanding the difference between these exchange rates and being able to defend your calculations isn't just a technical exercise. It's about understanding your company's legal liability and your own professional responsibility.
So I'll leave you with this one final question to think about for your own workplace. Is your hearing conservation program just built to check the box for OSHA compliance? Or is it truly built for prevention, to protect your people's hearing for a lifetime? If you found this breakdown useful, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the essential technical topics that every safety professional needs to know.